The start of 2025 has been back-to-back-to-back Marvel, so for the third time this year we'll be diving back into the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games to take a look at the Thunderbolts, which has largely been considered to be a return to form for the franchise. These characters are obviously not super popular, so most of them aren't actually playable. However, some of them are, and this is the first video in the series where I'll be playing the other versions of the game, and I'll explain what I mean later on. Before we jump into the video, I just wanted to give a minor spoiler warning. I wrote the majority of this video before I'd seen the film, so there won't actually be any plot spoilers, but one of the characters we'll be looking at in this video has technically not been shown in the marketing for the film, but you can guess who they are based on comic knowledge and the trailers. And there's also a character in the film who's rumoured to be someone else based on their name and the clothes they wear, but again that's not part of the official marketing, so technically it is a spoiler. But again, I won't actually be spoiling anything important, but if you want to stay out of the loop, you have been warned. So first off, let's talk about the characters we won't be talking about. Ghost does not appear in any of the games, but she does appear in Iron Man VR, which is surprisingly good. Taskmaster also does not appear in any of the games, which I was quite surprised by, like not even a simulator boss fight. The Dead Guardian is also not in any of the games, and surprisingly the Winter Soldier is also not playable in any of these. He does show up as an enemy early on in the first game, you apparently fight him in the PS2 and Wii version of the second game, and he does show up in a cutscene at the end of the third game. But I genuinely can't believe that he's not playable, at least in the third game since it was made post MCU, and Bucky is like a popular character. And also, if I've got anything wrong in this video about like where they show up, I do apologise, but the wikis for this game are almost non-existent, so there's a chance that one of these characters is actually in the game somewhere. So there's 4 characters who aren't in the games, but there are 4 who are in the games, at least specific versions of them. Just to get them out of the way, US Agent appears as a costume for Captain America in the first and third games, but we've already covered Cap, so there's a link below if you want to watch that video. And before we start, I need to go over the different versions of the game, and like I said before, the wikis aren't great, so hopefully this is all correct. We'll start with the easy one. Ultimate Alliance 3 only came out on the Switch. Simple. However, the first game came out on PC, GBA, Wii, Xbox, Xbox 360, Xbox One, PS2, PSP, PS3, and PS4. Every video on the channel so far has been the PS4 version played on a PS5, and this is apparently based on the 360 versions of the original games. For the first game, it is quite simple, and for the most part, it basically just boils down to last gen and next gen. On October 24th, 2006, it launched on Xbox, 360, PC, and PS2. The PSP and GBA games also came out then, but we'll talk about them in a bit because they are kind of separate. The PlayStation 3 version came out on launch day on November 17th, and the Wii version came out on launch day on November 19th. In the EU, we got the PlayStation 3 a few months later, so I only just found out that in North America, the PS3 and the Wii came out in the same weekend. So like I said, for the most part, these are the exact same game, except the more powerful consoles look a lot better. The only major difference with these games is the 360 and PlayStation 3 versions have Colossus and Moon Knight, and the 360 version got further DLC with 8 more characters. So I only just found out today that there's a Game Boy Advance version, and it's a lot different, and it's honestly barely even recognisable as an Ultimate Alliance game. And finally, just before we actually get to the video, it would be a disaster if I didn't point out there was a scrapped GameCube version, which isn't too exciting, but Link from Zelda and Samus from Metroid were meant to be in the Wii version. And allegedly, which is the word that I use in all of these videos because the info never actually has an actual source, these characters were cut from the game because when the developer showed Nintendo, they showed it working on the PlayStation 2 build, and they were angry that Nintendo characters were being shown with PlayStation buttons. I don't know if any of that is actually real, but it is fascinating. Now let's finally get to the Thunderbolts. The PSP version of Ultimate Alliance 1 is the one we'll be focusing on today, because it exclusively includes Ronan, the original Captain Marvel, Hawkeye, who did actually end up being one of the DLC characters in the other game, but I assume this version is slightly different. And even though she appears throughout the story of the other versions, Black Widow is only playable in the PSP game. When I played this, I didn't actually realise how similar the versions of the game were, so I was surprised that the character lineup looked the exact same, and they've even got the same costumes for everyone.
Wolverine.
It's worth noting that I'm not playing this on the intended hardware, so it looks a lot better in this video than it did back in the day, and I did download a save from GameFAQs, just so I don't have to 100% the game again. So yeah, as you can see, everyone is here, but we also have the original Captain Marvel, Ronan, who's actually the Echo version, and on the other side we've got Hawkeye and Black Widow. There's a Natasha version, classic Black Widow, the Ultimate look, and the one we'll be using for this video, Yelena Belova. In the PSP game, they've all got the same amount of powers as they do in the PS4 version, so let's check them out. But first, we do have to appreciate a typo in our skill description. Just like in the main game, each of these new characters have their own solo mission, so that's where we'll head first. In Black Widow's mission, we fight Iron Man in the helicarrier, which is why the Doom bots are now Iron Man bots. First off, she has a charged gun attack, and I thought this would be similar to Punisher's sniper rifle, but it's an SMG that you can charge up first to aim. It's not very powerful, so I was quite confused by how this works at first. She also has a basic AoE move that poisons enemies around her, which actually does quite a lot of damage quite fast. And she has another AoE move that stuns enemies around her. Again, this does a lot of damage and also gives you a nice break, and I found out if you charge up the gun attack, there's a 50% chance it will insta-kill any stunned enemies, so this is a great synergy, especially if you just want to focus on a big enemy. Her ultimate is just a basic circle attack that hits all enemies, nothing too exciting here. I took another look at the skill descriptions and I realised if you don't charge it up, you can rapid fire shoot instead, so now the move makes a lot more sense. You can either do a lot of chip damage or try to stun enemies and get that 50% insta-kill. She also has a buff that increases damage, again nothing too exciting here, but her next move is super interesting and kind of bad. If you hit an enemy with these purple bullets, they'll be charmed and fight alongside you for 2 seconds. I spent the next minute or two just trying to get this move to actually work, and I did see that the number of seconds increases as you upgrade it, but it's already halfway upgraded, so I thought it'd at least do something by now. While I tried to get it working, I used her final 2 abilities. One is another buff that increases defense with a crazy animation, and an explosive knife that does an insane amount of damage. With her being yet another character without actual powers, she's not the most fun to play as, but honestly because of the knife, stun and poison moves, she actually is quite powerful, which kinda makes up for it. And playing as Black Widow here did remind me of when I mained her in Marvel's Avengers, RIP. Usually we just go in the order of the games, but it makes much more sense to stick with Black Widow in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. Black Widow is in this game by default, and you unlock her when the rest of the Avengers join at the start. Obviously this one is based on Natasha again, but there's a white version of her costume, and a Yelena costume. There is also an amber / gold / brown version of this suit, but I'm quickly run out of shield tokens so I couldn't buy this one. First off, she blocks with her batons, and her basic attacks are basic attacks. But what's quite cool is that her heavy pops up enemies and it has a huge range, so I'm sure if you wanted to, you could just spam this move and juggle the enemies forever. Then she has a similar move to the Punisher where she jumps back and shoots, which can then be spammed and aimed. She's got an AoE jump and slam attack, which can be spammed quite quickly, which makes it super useful. Similar to the first game, she can throw out grenades, but instead of stunning, they do damage this time. They do take a bit of a long time to go off though, so you'll need to think more when using this one. Something I immediately noticed while playing as Black Widow is that every single time you do a move as her, she does this exact same voice line. And this made me realise how weird the game sounds if you only have voice sounds on. Anyway, her final skill is a shock melee attack that you can hold down to stun the enemy, and then when you run out of energy or let go of the button, it does a big finishing attack. I do feel like I keep doing characters with no powers and find them kind of boring, but she kind of is. However, I do appreciate the flair that her ultimate attack has. It is very basic, but especially compared to the first game, there is something here. Now the next 2 characters we'll look at are the minor spoilers I mentioned earlier on, but first it's time to talk about the version differences in the second game. This game came out on all the same consoles as the last game, but instead of GBA, we're now on the DS. And again, for the most part, it does just kind of come down to last gen and next gen. It only came out on PC when the ports came out on PS4 and Xbox One, which again is meant to be based on the 360 version, which is the same as the PlayStation 3 version. But the PSP, PS2 and Wii versions are completely separate. Obviously it follows the same story, but they're different games fundamentally. What's interesting is that for some reason this version exclusively has Blade, Cyclops and Psylocke, whereas the next gen version is the only place you can play as Iron Fist, and then Black Panther, Cable, Carnage, Juggernaut, Magneto and Psylocke came out as DLC. However, the DS version is the only version across all 3 games where you can play as She-Hulk or Sentry, and that is why we're here. Now, I mentioned before I didn't want to play through the PSP version again, and I couldn't find a save file for the DS version online. So when I saw that Sentry is only on the Iron Man side, I got nervous thinking I'd have to get up to Act 2 at least. But thankfully, after fighting through the first few enemies, we found a shield point and he's already unlocked from the start. And it might be one of the weirdest starting lineups I've ever seen. We've got the same starting characters as the original game, but we can also play as Hulk, She-Hulk, Invisible Woman, Miss Marvel and Sentry. Like, what a weird collection. Why is Invisible Woman the only Fantastic Four member? Just like the main game, each character has 4 abilities, but from what I can tell, there's no costumes in the DS version. So as for the actual game, it's obviously different, but again, it's fundamentally the same. On the top screen, on your left, you can move around and do your basic attacks, and then on the bottom screen, you can change characters by touching their faces, or hit the 4 big buttons to use your powers. And let me just tell you, this game is rough, so let's just get through it. His top ability shoots out an AoE solar beam. He can also shoot an actual solar beam, which can also be shot from the air. sadly he's not invincible in this version of the game. One of his other moves is meant to buff your team and heal them, but for some reason it just completely messes up their AI and they go crazy. And finally, he's got a charge attack. If She-Hulk ever gets another season, I guess we'll come back to this, but I hope I never have to play this version again. So let's play the actual version of Ultimate Alliance 2 instead. But first, again, I do have to do some explanation. In the film, Geraldine Viswanathan plays a character called Mel, who wears a songbird necklace, and in the comics, there's a member of the Thunderbolts named Songbird, whose real name is Melissa. So if we put 2 and 2 together, these are the same character. And to add fuel to the fire, Brian Chapek, a producer in the film, said, "There is a character that fans are trying to figure out whether is she or is she not. I would say, what emblem does she wear that may or may not hint at this character's larger identity moving forward? Potentially, that's what I would say." Which, if you take it at face value, doesn't actually make any sense, but you can understand what he's trying to say. So you'll find out if Songbird is in the film when you go see it, but Songbird is playable in Ultimate Alliance 2. First off, her alternate costume is her out of her usual superhero gear, and her powers are all based on using her voice to attack. She can scream to do damage, and she can even create solid objects using her voice. So her abilities in the game reflect that. Even her block uses this idea. Her fusions are actually quite cool. She can make a force field around Jean Grey and the Hulk. She can swap force fields with the Invisible Woman. With Miss Marvel, she creates a jewel that deflects energy beams, and she flies up into the sky while attacking enemies so Magneto can smash them. Because she has a gimmick, she synergizes quite well with everyone. As for her actual powers, she can shoot out energy bullets that honestly don't do much damage, but they do ricochet against the walls, which is quite cool. She also has a crazy powerful move where she snaps her fingers and the enemy blows up. This does a ton of damage and it doesn't even use up much energy. And the best thing about it is it actually hits multiple enemies at once. Other than the stuff you need to do to get the Platinum, I'd never actually played the Songbird until now, but with just this move alone, it's quite clear she's one of the most powerful in the game. She also has a more powerful but slower version of her energy beam move, and this one is good too, but honestly when you find a move like the snap, everything else feels weak, and this move doesn't actually feel as good to use anyway. And finally she has a move where she screams, which is also quite powerful, and it also reminded me of why I love the Human Torch so much in this game. I do actually wonder if they made the less popular characters more powerful on purpose, just so more people actually want to play as them. So this has definitely been a bit of a weird video for a weird team, but it finally made me branch out and play the other versions of the game, which I did not enjoy, but you know, it is interesting to see how different they are. Thankfully, in a few months, the next team will be covering our mainstays in Ultimate Alliance games, so we can play the actual versions, and I'm looking forward to that, because the team does include one of my favourite characters in all 3 games. So if you enjoyed this video, hit the subscribe button, check the playlist below if you've not seen any of the other videos in this series, and I hope you have a good one.